Hi, Jared. Jared Jost is the VP of Marketing at PatientPop, founded in 2014. PatientPop has about 450 people, and it is based out of Santa Monica, California. You can't see this, but I can see that behind Jared, there's all sorts of green plants. And sitting from my home in Chicago, I am a little jealous of that. Can't lie. Prior to PatientPop, Jared was at Twistlock, which is a cybersecurity company. They actually got acquired, and he was also at Smarsh, which is a SaaS company. And Jared, so we connected. I actually heard about PatientPop because I've been following Justin Welsh for the past year. Have a lot of respect for him. He was the SVP of sales at PatientPop for 4.5 years, and now he's a strategic advisor, and he's advising PatientPop as well as other SaaS companies. So I was always kind of like looking out, what's PatientPop up to? I was really interested to get PatientPop, and now you're on the show. So great to have you here. On the funding side, PatientPop has raised Series C, so a total of $125 million. And what is it? Let me give a little blurb explanation, and then if I miss anything, you can add some stuff in whatever I miss. So PatientPop makes it easy for healthcare providers to attract more patients, manage their online reputation, modernize the patient experience, and automate the front office. So kind of in a nutshell, it's like modernizing for the health practice. It's kind of enhancing every digital touch point that they might have with a patient along the journey. Maybe they're searching for the provider online. Maybe they're checking the website, looking at reviews, booking an appointment, getting an alert about that appointment, right? Like then getting a survey, like all of these different touch points, you basically help to handle this, to automate this. The other thing I was going to say was when I went on the website, there's this really cool built-in tool. And as a healthcare provider, you can actually check your performance online and see how you stack up against other practices. So you can add your practice name, you can add the number of people there, add the specialty, and then you're basically graded. And I wanted to ask you, just to kick this off, who came up with this cool tool, and how effective is this for lead generation?
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to have me on the show or the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. And yes, you nailed the company, right? Just trying to optimize every step of the patient journey there. But yeah, looking at, we call it our competitive scanner. And it really, in its current iteration, that was owned by a product marketer on my team. And we had a full stack web developer that's also sitting in the marketing team, plus a creative director that really kind of brought the idea to life. And then we worked with our R&D team to get that fully built and hosted. But it's really one of our primary lead generation assets, and it's very kind of a high intent asset for us, right? Like it's someone who's really seriously thinking about how they want to improve their online performance, and so it's been a strong lead to demo book rate, and consistently is one of our top producing assets. And the great thing is it's something that lives on forever. It doesn't really seem to have a shelf life, so we really built that kind of evergreen element that's really been a focal point of our lead generation efforts.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to hit on that because I think that's really smart to build something, and then it's high intent people, which instantly is going to be great for follow up later on. So awesome. So you were VP of Demand Gen at PatientPop you've been VP of Demand Gen at PatientPop for almost 2 years, and then you became VP of Marketing. And there's like all these words, right, floating around: demand gen and marketing and growth. And like, what does it all mean to you? Like, what does marketing mean to you? Is it different from demand gen? Is it all the same thing? What do you think?
Yeah, I think to me, marketing is really, maybe I'm biased given my background, but marketing is really about creating demand, which is not just generating leads. I think people confuse demand gen and lead gen. And even in my title, that was kind of the case, right? Where demand gen marketers are typically out there trying to drive leads for the organization. Typically, they do that by using content and other resources to, educate hopefully their audiences and bring those leads in. But I think marketing is that whole encompassing. How do you build demand, right? How do you build awareness for your brand? How do you establish yourself as a thought leader or a trusted resource to your target audience? And the demand gen function is really, how do you convert that into leads, that turns into pipeline, that turns into revenue? So I think, especially in a startup environment, marketing is demand gen at one level or another across the entire marketing teams, right, that you have. But it's really just about building that demand for your product. And so that's really how we've built the marketing team at PatientPop. And demand gen is traditional demand gen or lead gen is a very critical component of it, but you need those other parts to be balanced and to have great success.
Did whatever you were up to as VP of demand gen versus VP of marketing, did anything change in terms of your responsibilities?
Yeah, I think moving into the VP of marketing role, as a VP of demand gen, it was really about the pipeline over everything, right? Making sure that we were driving the right leads to sales, working really tightly with sales to make sure that not only were we driving leads, but we were working with sales to make sure that they were getting the most out of those leads and maximizing the return there. Moving into a marketing role is really starting to be more active in the role of thinking about, okay, what do we need to do from a product messaging standpoint, getting more into kind of the thought leadership elements at a high level. I mean, I think when we think of our thought leadership programs, a lot of times we start with let's think about what's going to be really impactful and be help educate our end buyers. And then typically demand gen, you may use whatever asset was created at that top level, or you might start to create the smaller pieces off of that. So maybe we do a big industry report where we survey, in our case, we're servicing healthcare providers. So we may survey healthcare providers. We may go out and do a survey of just ordinary people to get the patient perspective on it and build a very long survey report on the findings there. And then typically with the demand gen team and the lead gen function, you're creating smaller assets to then get people interested in it to lead down funnel. So I think moving to that VP of marketing, I got to focus a bit more on what are those high level pieces that are going to establish PatientPop as the experts in practice growth.
Got it. So more of like, what's the pillar that we start with based on like what's our strategy, and then from there, turning it into smaller assets, more like demand gen, and thinking about where in the funnel.
Yeah, how are you going to convert the leads there, and then that's kind of within the marketing function, and then you also start to think more broadly within the organization. Right, you go from being a functional leader to being a cross-functional leader at an executive level, and it's really then starting to work closely with product teams, with sales leadership at the top level, and your executive suite.
Makes sense. Yep. When I talked about the company, you said I got it spot on. Is there anything that I missed that you want to add?
I think it's really the premise behind it is, I'm assuming a lot of the listeners today are marketers, right? And our product is really to help independent healthcare providers really run their practice like it's a business. And we're really there to, if you think of the full patient journey, right? Customer journey, buyer's journey, they have the same problem and same challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. And so we're trying to make that as much of an integrated digital first strategy for them. So giving them the tools and the resources to, be found online, right? SEO. And then once they get to the website, making sure that's super convenient to book an appointment, connect with the practice, understand, what services they offer. And then kind of through the journey, reminders, making sure they show up, getting them to show up for that appointment. And then afterwards, making sure that, hey, did you have a good experience? Please help us, right? Leave a review, help us build our online reputation. And then after that, it's like the customer journey. You got to get them to, hopefully, depending on the type of practice and the services you offer, it might be, you need to come back again for your annual checkup or whatever it might be, kind of that full loop process. So it's very similar to the challenges we face. And, as a small business, it could be hard to do that if you don't have a full-time marketer. And so we're really trying to be that resource for these practices to run a successful and healthy practice. So, but yes, it's all of those touches along the patient journey that we're really trying to optimize for them and make as simple and straightforward as possible for the practice.
It almost seems like you're a digital marketing consultancy, but like with a product that helps these healthcare providers. Is that accurate?
It's accurate. I mean, we're technology at our core, right? Because we have over 6,000 customers, and we are built on a platform, and it just happens. Basically, you have your website solution, you have your online scheduling tool. So it's more of a full suite. I'd liken it somewhat to like a marketing automation solution. Thinking about like, this is something that you go in daily, and this is how you run your business. Like, so as a marketing team, we run everything out of our marketing automation solution or Salesforce, right? And in a similar world, that's kind of the world we're in. It's like, this is kind of their command center to run their practice.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So you joined about 3.5 years ago, and I'd love to hear from you. What stage was the company in? Like what was going on with the marketing back then? Mm-hmm. And what did you prioritize to work on then, maybe, versus focused on now?
Yeah. So we were post A funding round. And so what we were really looking at that point is like we had a great market fit. And I think you alluded to, following Justin, like he had built a really strong sales organization. So we had a really high performing sales team that, had driven incredible growth. So our company was founded, and I think one thing is, you kind of said at the beginning, we were founded in 2014, coming in 2017. We're 3 years in, and the company is growing really fast at that point in time, but it's been driven by the sales team. And so coming in, it was really about trying to continue to propel that machine, right? That engine that Justin had built. And so it was really about how do we drive more leads and more pipeline for that organization. So coming in as a VP of demand gen, it was kind of recognized that we needed to just make sure we had the right scalable systems in place to sustain growth, right? You can grow pretty fast, I think, with one core kind of engine driving it, right? So we had sales. We were trying to get that second leg to the stools. Channel and partners becomes a third leg, and then upsells to your customers can be that fourth leg of that stool. And so this was really that second. I guess partners was there too as well, but we needed that balance there, right? And so really kind of coming in, it was about looking at what was working and what wasn't working, understanding what the sales org needed in order to be successful, and then it was really something where we just connected sales and marketing, right? Making sure we're all on the same page, we're driving to the same results, we have aligned goals. And so we really were just working on those foundational pieces in some ways, but then also once we have those, how fast and what's it going to take to scale this up? So it was really about just the mechanics, the operations, and finding what worked, testing, a lot of testing in those early days to find what was working and what were going to be the avenues for scalable growth.
Yeah. So curious at that point in time, and I know it's 3.5 years ago, or like 3 years ago, what did the sales org need? Like what were the pockets of kind of low hanging fruit that you saw?
It was, as it relates to marketing, it was a really clearly defined handoff process from marketing to sales. Marketing needed to go a bit further into the sales process to make sure that, I think it's a common mistake to think, hey, marketing, your job's to drive leads. Sales job is to create pipeline. And so we really started to move that mesh point from just generating a lead number to making sure we were tied to opportunities, pipeline, and revenue. The convenient thing about PatientPop is we have a relatively short sales cycle. So there's a pretty tight feedback loop. That's something unique that I had been in more traditional, kind of what I would consider traditional B2B SaaS companies, where you might have a 3 to 18 month long sales cycle. Coming to PatientPop, selling into the SMB space, we really saw a lot shorter kind of sales cycles, so we could measure more directly to bottom of funnel to actual bookings coming in, and making sure that, you know, a program might be really good at generating leads, but if it wasn't generating the right pipeline or the right revenue, we were able to, you know, scale that one down and find another one that we scaled up. So it was really starting to work with sales to find those things that would help them get to their, you know, their weekly, monthly numbers, and really refine those processes. And then it was just a continually iterating on that process, and how do you scale? Like we were working with a inbound SDR function, right? So how do you start to make sure that they're staying busy, and then once they get too busy, how do you bring in the next one and the next one and the next one, and really scaling that program? And, you know, eventually we got to a point where it's like, okay, we can't have just a we got that team kind of too big to kind of manage on its own. So we had to figure out, how do we now spread the demand and the leads that are being generated across a broader team that is kind of doing some inbound and some outbound lead qualification and pipeline creation. So yeah, it was really just kind of working on the I kind of have more of an operational mindset when I come to the problem, and it's like, okay, how do we get things going through the funnel, if you will, and where do we see places that it's breaking or it's not optimized? And then once you kind of get the base fixed, then you can start to work on kind of each conversion point and making sure you're getting that optimized.
Awesome. Okay, last kind of question that ties into all of this. I'm just curious, your inbound versus your outbound. Sounds like you had SDRs, you know, you had your sales team, you had your AEs, right? Yep. What was marketing doing early on there for inbound? Or was it more that the SDRs were focused on the outbound versus the inbound? Like, how did you think about inbound versus outbound at that, in those early days?
So when I joined, they were building up the SDR organization. So we essentially had 2 SDRs that were only focused on marketing generated leads, right? So we had a kind of a split function. We called it an MDR. And then we had an SDR that was focusing on outbound exclusively. And so that's kind of where we were. And that was, you know, there's pros and cons to any system. It worked well because the feedback loop between the SDR or the MDR function and marketing was really tight. So we could, you know, turn on a new campaign, start driving, maybe it's a white paper that we're driving leads from. We could hear within a week or less, hey, this is working, this isn't working. We're getting leads, but we're not able to make the pivot to talking about the product effectively in this with this particular asset. So we could kind of turn things and iterate pretty quickly and have a really tight feedback loop. So that was the benefit there. And kind of once we had that going, we were able to scale that up kind of with lead volume. It's like, okay, we're going to drive this many leads this month. Okay, we need to add a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th MDR into that function.
Okay, cool. That's great. Thank you for explaining that. So let's talk about now, who's on the marketing team, and is it structured in a unique way that's like really effective? I know you talked about some of the, like, you know, what teams you have and how it's broken down, but I'd love to hear more specifics there.
Yeah. So I guess the kind of the way I look at marketing is basically I have it kind of structured right now as 3 pillars, and kind of one pillar is going to be your demand gen team. They're really focused on the campaigns and the programs that are running. Then you have a product marketing function that sits next to them. And then the 3rd pillar is really content and communications. And so they're the ones creating a lot of the written copy that works for, you know, white papers, survey reports, external communications, and then supporting that. So I kind of have like these 3 pillars, and then supporting that across the bottom is a creative services function, right? Video, design, web, and a lot of other elements that help not only the marketing team, but then also helps kind of the rest of the organization, whether that's, you know, the CS team needing resources for customer outreach, the people team for recruiting purposes or internal resources for different events we might be doing. So that's kind of the how we structure it. I don't know if it's particularly unique in any sense, but it just gives us kind of a good alignment on how projects flow. And then I'm able to kind of look at each of those teams, and they then obviously work together. And that's kind of the key, is making sure that although we're in these distinct functions, it's not a silo, right? Roles and responsibilities shift and kind of span maybe multiple kind of areas on any given project.
Yeah, I love that you have creative services as kind of like the backbone and helping the entire organization. I think a lot of times we think of the designer working solely with marketing, right, or product marketing, but that makes sense. Like you might need creative services, and especially now with the push to digital, you need it in every single realm.
Yeah.
Right.
Really.
So it truly does make a lot of sense. So let's talk about your marketing these days. What is working really well for you right now? Like you mentioned that you have had historically like short sales cycle. That's pretty awesome. What's working really well for you right now to get that, drive awareness, get people engaged, like nurture them, get that pipeline going, and then, closed one, get the revenue. What's working exceptionally well these days?
Yeah, yes, there's a lot of things that work really well from like a last point attribution standpoint. So I think PPC, organic, always, high intent, people are finding you and engaging with that. So that's always been a pretty strong kind of, once we got that puzzle figured out, it's been a really consistent performer for us. We do a lot of display campaigns, both through an agency partner we have, plus some of our own kind of in-house efforts, really targeting around like, where our audiences are at. For us, LinkedIn isn't a great channel for us. I've been in other places where LinkedIn has been great as a way to drive leads, but channels like Facebook and have been fantastic for us. So it's really kind of making sure we're in the right place, we're targeting the right audience, right? We understand our customers there, and really seeing the display. And I think one thing that we've learned over the last year, I guess, if the COVID impact for us, is we had to really think that kind of display channel in a lot of ways. So, typically we're driving around like, white paper downloads, case study downloads, watch a video, a lot of those pieces. And we really kind of had to try to elongate or break up that funnel a little bit more, and moving into like what's kind of early stage content. And then if we get people engaged, how do we start targeting them through more that what we would in our world call like more middle intent, like middle of the funnel, where that might be where we start to sprinkle in the white papers and longer pieces of content. And then down the bottom, going back to that competitive scanner, we might start to get people to that point before really pushing them through into the sales kind of into
case studies. Yeah.
So really, we used to kind of just have like a very download white paper, very traditional, like let's get the white paper. We were treating it like as more of a modern day content syndication program, where it's like, hey, we're gonna get content downloads, we're gonna be driving it, so it's gonna feed directly into our system. We're gonna have rapid, be able to follow up really quickly, and that worked really well. But kind of with COVID, things kind of it wasn't working the same way as it had before, became much less predictable. So we've had to kind of evolve a bit, and that's been showing some really good results as of late. So I think it's made us better marketers as a result. And then as you get those leads and those contacts, or for us, it's typically doctors into our universe. Now we've got our content programs to do nurture programs and webinars and a lot of great thought leadership content to be that resource to them in an ongoing basis. And then as we see engagement, moving those over to the SDRs to follow up with them. So those, so I think, we have our high intent, really kind of short sales cycles. We can push them through with kind of the direct response tactics. And then there's kind of the relationship building channels that we've really built up over the last, 6 to 12 months to really drive higher lead volume and more opportunities for our sales teams.
Cool. A couple questions. Why do you think like breaking up the content funnel and why do you think like during COVID, breaking up the content funnel was a necessary thing to do, and then it actually worked for you? I can maybe come up with a couple of reasons, but
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah, I'll try to be succinct here. I mean, I think, COVID, so obviously we're selling to doctors, and healthcare providers. They are our front lines. They are, really they're the heroes, in a lot of ways in the pandemic. So there have been times where their attention is divided. The amount of effort just to practice today is significantly more. And I think, before, and it's significantly more just because there's a lot of procedures that they now have to go through, just with like, how are they going to move patients through their offices? What are the breaks between patients being in a room? It's like, clean everything up. And there's just a lot more process that they have to think about. So they're fully consumed by that. And I think our ask was a reasonably big time commit, right? Hey, download this white paper, read it. We're going to be contacting you. Whereas, we kind of moved to a world where it was more of a progressive engagement, right? So they could get us in smaller snippets, and we just saw that coming through. And I also think, in the process there was just a lot more kind of consideration that they needed to go through before deciding to enter into a sales opportunity or into that buying process. And we needed to adjust our tactics to accommodate kind of how their process had changed as well. So I think if we think of like just attention and what they're going through day in and day out, and also just understanding that the decision-making process, the buying process changed because their businesses were significantly impacted by COVID. And so they had to think about things on the economic side in a much different framework than they had before. So we just had to kind of adapt to that change.
That makes sense. Yeah. And then, like you said, it makes you better marketers. I think you're kind of pushed into this area of like, okay, we have to change things, put the barriers down, and think about things a little bit more creatively and be attuned to what their needs are. So it does make you a better marketer for sure. Another question I had was like the thought leadership piece that you're getting more into. What kind of thought leadership are you putting out there?
Yeah, I mean, I have a great team, and they've really been doing, for us, it's great to do our customer's customer, right? So we've done a lot of patient surveys, and just getting input from patients, and then distilling out kind of what are the trends, how are they feeling about the market conditions right now, or about different trends in just healthcare. And then then we also have obviously the provider world, and we can get their perspective on those same trends, right? And it becomes really helpful to see, what they can look and see what their peers are doing and how they're engaging and managing through this time. And then they can also hear how patients are managing and adapting during this time. And I think that starts to give a really connected message to what matters most to our hopefully potential customers and our current customers, right? Is like, hey, we're trying to inform you and help you to deliver better care, right? And a better patient experience. And we're trying to have those voices. We're also, coming up, this is, we're marketers, and we think about marketing kind of all day. And so being able to think about, hey, what would be a good way to, communicate with your patients during COVID, right? So, we did a webinar I think last week, and it was just all about how do you communicate around COVID, right? It doesn't tie into it didn't have a real direct tie to the product, like, hey, this is, come buy this, but it was very much like things that our product obviously can help them with, but it's just like, how do you keep your patients informed? How do you be that trusted resource? I think there's a stat that's going around, like 68%, actually don't quote me on that, but nearly 70% of patients say they trust their provider more than they trust what they're hearing on the news, right? So our customers have this amazing opportunity to really educate and inform everybody, right? And they're that trusted resource. And so we're trying to help them kind of live into that. And that's kind of where we're really trying to push our content, or that leadership is like, hey, providers, here's how you can think about messaging to your patients. Here's how you can think about building a really what your patients will feel is a very safe and convenient way to engage with you. Be really clear about what your COVID procedures are. Make it really easy for them to book an appointment, to connect with you, to get into the office to see you if anything's going on. So we're really just trying to, get in their shoes and really help them really deliver the best care possible.
Awesome. It's great to hear that, number one, you're creating a space for these providers, like with the webinar and the thought leadership. You get them together, you're helping them out. It's kind of a community right now that they're together, and you've created that space for them and the knowledge for them. And then two, like, you're actually leveraging internal data because of the surveys that you send out for your providers, right? You have that access to that data, provider, interviews or surveys, whatever. You have that data, and then you can leverage that as part of your thought leadership. And I think that's so smart. And I love it when companies mention doing so, because it's like, that's the value. I had someone else on the podcast talk about the fact that they built out microsites because they have access to all this data. They're like, let's make it available. Let's have this like real-time microsite updated with how things are going in terms of like e-commerce and distribution. And I think this is kind of this in the same vein. So I love that you mentioned that. What about challenges? I know that you mentioned, COVID kind of threw things up in the air a little bit. You had to realign, but what are the big challenges that you're trying to figure out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge in some regards stays the same, right? Like, how do you, in this world of how do you stay relevant with your ideal customers, right? And the challenge is like, how do you continue to be that resource and deliver value? And then on the other side, it's like how the challenge of always trying to scale, right? And continue to grow. I mean, despite, the challenges we faced through COVID, the desire and the drive to continue to grow has been there, right? We are, very much a, SaaS startup company has high aspirations. And so we have to figure out, how do we work through these challenges to continue to drive the company in the direction we want? Because the more, obviously it's this cycle, right? The more customers we get on, the more value we can deliver through new product development, learn new insights, have more data points to determine how to help practices succeed. So it's just this continual drive to continue to scale and doing it in a way that is sustainable for the business. And so that's really the challenge. But and I think in that process, it forces you to grow in new areas, right? So you have to really think about what does what does our communication strategy look as we continue to grow, and not only bring in more customers, but deliver new products and adapt products for current market situations. So it's just the challenge is just continue to be adaptable. Don't be stuck, right? Like, how do you continue to be curious and keep your eyes open to figure out where are the next opportunities and where is that opportunity for scale? What's
the best way to do that? To just like be able to think of new products, be able to stay relevant, be able to adapt. Like, that's some tough challenges. How do you approach that?
Again, I think it's less about me and more about the team I have, right? We have people on the team that are very much curious and really want to just create in their own way. I think create sometimes feels very much like only creative services can do it, but I think everybody across the team is creating new things, trying new things, experimenting. It's kind of one of those things where the key thing is just to create room for people to try something out. If it works, great. Well, we'll try to double it, triple what you're doing because it's working, right? And if it's not working, hey, you know what? What did we learn? What can we try next? And that's true from programs. That's true on content. It's true on creative assets. Like, just continuing to try new things. The data and hearing from our customers, our prospects, patients, like that helps us start to understand some more data points and to really think about, okay, what does that mean? How can we help? What can we solve? And continue going that. So I think we keep it moving and we keep it fresh by, saying like, hey, we know where we want to go, right? Defining where we want to go, but the path there isn't clear. It's on the team to really just think about what can we do? How can we chart our course to that destination? And I think that's how I keep it fresh. And definitely the team steps up to the challenge, and they come in with fresh ideas constantly.
Awesome. I love that it's like a team. It's part of the culture, right? So that's really cool. How did you help take the company from Series B to Series C? Maybe we could talk about that. Like, what does that look like? What actually matters? What did you have to focus in on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it was just about building a healthy business, right? Like, it was really about doing the things that would set our company up to show that we've made it from one level to the next level, and there's no indicator that that's the ceiling, right? That we're still ready to go to the next and to the next. So it's really, I think, going way back to the beginning kind of our conversation, like when you come in, it's making sure you have the right systems and processes and in place, and then you're just continually incrementally changing things. It wasn't like, okay, great, now we're going to go launch this, $1 million awareness campaign, and we're going to go try to drive all this traffic. It's really about, okay, what are the incremental investments that we can make to continue to scale our business and scale the sales and marketing impact within the organization. So really getting from that B to C was proving that we could scale, from that, wherever we were to 60 million or what, like, how do you continue to jump, right? When you're small, I think, the growth is, as a percentage, is easier to get that really high growth. But as you get larger, when the base starting point is a larger number, maintaining that growth gets a little bit more challenging. And we just had to prove that we could do that. And so, for me, it was really just hooking up at the hip with sales, right? And making sure that sales and marketing were completely aligned on how we were going to try to hit our goals.
Makes sense to me. One word that hasn't come up during the entire conversation, and maybe it's because you think about it as kind of rolling into marketing, is brand.
Yeah.
How do you think about brand, and did you start working on that in the early days? And what are you doing now to make sure that your brand strategy and like your brand is part of the growth efforts and it's actually making an impact?
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge a lot of startups face, right? Like, do you focus really intent on the lead gen and the growth? And we've, kind of our philosophy to this point has really been to use our kind of content and our push into the market to spread awareness around. It's really about how do we, own our category? How do we drive the value that our practices need, and really establish ourselves as like, hey, if you want to grow your practice, if you want to get more patients, improve your online reputation, and you're a doctor, like, PatientPop is your destination, right? That's where you should be. And so we've done more of it. We've done brand building in more of a pushing our message out there for our kind of through our demand gen activities. And so I think that's been the primary way. And I really see, like, as we've rolled out like the survey data and a lot of the understanding the marketplace and showing that we know kind of what is happening on the ground, we have conversations really spread, like, we understand what's going on. We're really capable in this space, and that starts to propel our brand. Like, when we were going to trade shows a lot, like, you'd always hear like, oh, I heard you guys. I know I heard about you guys when I was reading and doing some research, and then I came to your website. Now I see your ads everywhere. I just knew I had to come to your booth at the show because I can't escape you guys. So I might as well figure out what's going on here, right? And it was one of those things where we just put out enough effort, there was enough content to bring them in, and then it was just continually getting in front of that audience and being really specific around who we're targeting and what we're going for. And that's really helped us to get broad awareness and really build our brand. And then we have just again, like I talk about the content team, creatives, like there's just such a strong attention to detail within the marketing team, within our organization, that, you know, we really put together an image. So when people come, I think there's this impression that, you know, we are this this company that's been doing this forever, even though we've been at it for, I guess we've been doing it 5 or 6 years. So we've been around for a while, but it was just really this polish around kind of the pieces of the materials that we're creating that really resonated with folks as well.
Awesome. Thank you for talking through that. What we talked about, like your team and experimenting and doing some things and trying to, you know, come up with ideas and staying creative. What are a couple of like really good marketing ideas that you've come up with either recently or during the time at PatientPop?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the team, like, I can't take credit for any of these things, but, you know, I think a lot of the things that we've covered today, you know, are ideas that have come from the team, not necessarily from me. Like, you started at the top with the competitive scanner, like that is just, you know, I you know, every once in a while I'll have a conversation with someone at a startup, right? They're a little bit earlier stage. I'm like, create a tool that people are going to engage with and that you're going to deliver value through, that is also a lead capture tool. I think that's the best idea. And if you don't have that, if you can set up a trial or a freemium, just some way for people to get a taste for the insights and the value that you can deliver, I think is critical in for any startup today, right? Like if you can get that, I think that can propel your marketing programs a lot faster, especially in those early stages. So I think that's a good idea. And you know, like when I joined, that was purely just like a scanner, right? Like you would go put your practice information in, and it would just rate your site for like page load speeds and, you know, online reputation, or just, you know, how many profiles have you claimed? And really what we did is took that from being a very basic tool to something really insightful and comparing you to other practices in your zip code in your specialty. So I think, you know, that's been such a key part of what we've done. And I think just, you know, a lot of what we talked about, like thinking about things more like from the perspective of your ideal customer, right? Like, what do they need to know, and changing, right? Like, okay, we've been running white paper campaigns forever, but do we need to break that up so we're getting more, you know, lighter weight content and getting people into the funnel, and kind of having that digital nurture process. And that's something that we've experimented with, and we're going to continue to experiment and improve as we go. But I think that we just have to, as marketers, we just have to think more like, how do we engage with our audiences where they're at in that buyer's process? And I think it's just, there's more tools at our disposal to kind of walk them through that journey, and we just have to kind of adopt them and find the right use cases. And it's going to vary from, you know, market to market, industry to industry, and, you know, how your overall buying process proceeds.
I'm curious that the scanner, right, that tool that you developed early on, it was simple, right? But did it still work? Like, you don't need anything too complicated. It just needs to really hit on like where the pain point is and where the company can help, right?
That's it. And I think, you know, and maybe this is a good point, is it isn't about creating the most elegant or the most complicated, complex, really powerful solution. It's really about identifying a pain point or a problem that your customer may or may not realize that they have, and then just being able to show them very quickly, like, hey, there's a different way to think about this. You really got to just kind of create that trigger for them to say, hey, I need to rethink what I'm doing, because I think there might be a better way, and this is showing me that there might be a better way. And it's really kind of saying, like, yeah, here, see this? Okay, we can do these 3 things pretty quickly, and you're going to see a big impact to your performance. So
awesome, great. So what are some bad recommendations that you hear in marketing or demand gen that keep coming up, and you're like, I wish these people would just stop it already? Anything that comes to mind?
I mean, the thing that I think what I'm always like is when I hear people say, hey, it's, you know, it's about leads. It's just about getting leads, and they put all of like the marketing's focus on how many leads did you generate last month, right? Or this week, or whatever the time period. Like, it kind of causes me to cringe, because it's like, if marketers know we can go buy leads, we can go buy a list, we can go buy leads. Like what is a lead, right? And that doesn't matter as much as what's the pipeline and what's the revenue that's being generated. So I think I don't know if it's bad advice, but I think just a bad construct, and oftentimes that you hear is like, okay, how many leads did you do? And it's too simple for how marketing can really show their value. And I think, and this is something I fall under because I've lived in the demand gen side, but only measuring marketing's performance by what they contribute from a lead or a revenue standpoint, and not seeing the overall kind of impact that marketing can have across the organization, whether that's, for the sales organization as they're doing their outreach, or the CS team and the customer success team trying to, develop and establish those relationships with our customers. So I think that those are kind of the two things where it's like, it's all about leads, and then it's all about like only the revenue contribution, and it's not taking into that broader picture of what is marketing doing to elevate the brand across kind of the whole space.
Yeah, this has really gotten me thinking, because I'm of the mindset that like lead generation has always been a little bit, maybe because it's kind of like a little bit shady the way that some companies do it. Like they will buy lists and they will spam, and that's not the right way. And we all know it's not the right way, but I'm sure it's still happening. So for me personally, like thinking about lead generation and getting someone's email, like that being an objective of, okay, I'll let you visit that webinar or listen to that or look at that ebook, but I need your email first. Mm-hmm. That's never been part of my toolkit or like approach, I guess. Yeah. And I'm more of the mindset of like, if you're going to read this, like, here you go. Here's the thought leadership. Please, by all means, have access to this, because if you are looking at it, listening to the podcast, like doing anything, then that's already like a win in my book, honestly, yeah. Because like our attentions are so, just like you said, it's not just the doctors. I think people in general, we're all over the place. Our attentions are just so scarce that if you can have somebody that's interested, following you, reading your stuff, listening to your stuff, why gate it and ask for an email when you can just buy a list of emails, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on the frame of reference. And I think that's kind of when we did our full funnel approach, right? Like there's a lot of content that a lot of content is out there and available. And, as you think of a kind of lower funnel content, like part of it is to get leads, right? We have a sales organization that's hungry. And a lot of times, even if that never turns into anything, they're in our database, right? They're in our programs. And, we're going to continue to send great content around the topics that seem to be of interest to them, whether that's, online reputation or practice growth. And so I think it's a way to start the conversation and say, hey, we're going to give you information, and this is a convenient way to do it. And, there's the mechanisms to opt out. But yes, I think you got to deliver value before you ask for something. And yeah, lists have never served, lists have never served me well. So that kind of lesson was learned a long time ago. So I tend to stay away from those.
Yep. Let's talk about, stepping out of your comfort zone, which clearly you've done. Marketers have to do all the time, weekly, daily basis, right? Just as part of the job. Yeah. And people will inevitably fail when they step out of their comfort zone. So how has a failure set you up for later success? Like, what do you have a favorite failure?
Gosh, this is some like critical self-examination. I don't, not like one of those light bulb moments. Like you're like, oh my gosh, I did this so wrong that the exact opposite must be true. Or, you go from nothing to something great. But I think it's one of those things of like, we kind of covered it, but it's like always being willing to try something new, even if you don't know if it's going to work, even if it could put you out there or it could set you up for failure. But I think if you start just doing them, and I'm not a massive risk taker by nature, but I am like, I like to do more incremental risks. Like, okay, here we're going to go do this. We're going to do this. We're going to step. If it doesn't work, okay, we're going to change paths. But at some point, you kind of have to call your shot, and you've got to go for it. But I think you can either take that big shot first without having the data points along the way, or you can start to just take those incremental risks. And then you'll start to see, okay, I'm charting my course. It's never a straight path, right? Never in life is it a straight path to your destination. And so you got to do those incremental things. And so, I think I'm trying to think of like a single failure, but just like, I can just think of countless times where we've tried, a campaign, a new channel, like, okay, this is gonna be it. This is gonna go crazy. We're gonna do this. It's gonna be 100 opportunities a month, and it's gonna be so scalable, and it's gonna totally function. And you get into it, and you start going through it, and you're like, oh, we missed this part of it, right? And I think that maybe it's those types of experiences where we're like, oh, we're gonna build this awesome SDR team that's gonna drive all these leads, and then you're like, oh wait, we forgot about these 3 things that we normally do that become really hard in that type of environment. Or, hey, we had really good success on this marketing channel. This one is really similar to it. Let's just go and do the exact same thing, and realize that you took steps to get to those results on that other channel, and you have to do that build process and take those kind of building blocks up to get it to scalable. So I think there's no huge, I guess I'm not pointing to like this massive failure, but I think those incremental tests are kind of a way to test the waters. And like I said, I'm kind of risk averse, so I like to do those incremental steps, but I don't mind being uncomfortable.
Totally. And I think that it's really based on the person, right? Some marketers and leadership, right, they're more pro risk, and they'll take big bets and try crazy things, and maybe that works, and maybe they will do that a bunch of times, and then they hit on something that works. But it's not everybody that needs to do things in that manner, and having an incremental approach where you like test certain things out and have some incrementality and then test something. That's another way to do it. So it's interesting to hear that, and it's part of your personality, and so and it's clearly working, right? It's just a different way. So thanks for sharing that. Anything else while I still have you here for a few minutes, if you can share something more personal about yourself. We started to get into some personal stuff, like with your being risk averse, right? Maybe something that's strange, maybe something that you really love, but others just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example is I also kind of like I try not to have like mainstream thought doesn't always apply. Like I always try to defy convention, kind of be the outsider in some ways, and try to think of something like, okay, like if everybody's doing that, there must be something else that I can do that's different. Like I was like Android day one, because everybody was going for the iPhone. I'm like, I'm gonna go get Android because I don't want to do that, right? In early days of Android, but I think. And
now you have an iPhone, right?
I do not, but I do have work gave me a MacBook, so I am in the Apple world a little bit. No, I've always been Android. I bought on early. I don't know why. Just seemed like everybody had an iPhone. I'm like, I'm gonna do this. And it's just been, things. It's funny, like the joke when we're more in an in-office environment, I would always have music playing, like with my headphones on, and then we'd go to the conference room to play, and for whatever reason, every time I would start projecting, my music would come on. And everybody's like, what is this stuff? Like, it was always like some like indies rock or something from, back in my day. So it's always just trying to like, what's kind of that, what's just another way to look at things. And, my wife's like, why do you have to make things so difficult? Or, like research things to an nth degree. And I'm like, it's just kind of something I just gotta take another approach and try to see if there's a different way of thinking about it. Sometimes it's a little bit extra, but other times it served me well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, thank you, Jared, for sharing all of this. We covered a ton of topics, a ton of interesting things that you're working on, your expertise, how you approach marketing and demand gen and growth at the company. and talking about, you know, it's clear that you're a leader, right? You mentioned it several times. It's not really about you, it's about the team. And a lot of the examples you shared is really like about the team, and it's your job more so to be the leader that kind of gets the right people in the right positions and like gives them the space to breathe and to come up with different things to test and ideas to have. So that's awesome. So you can reach Jared on LinkedIn, Jared Jost, and find out more about PatientPop at patientpop.com. Thank you so much, Jared, for coming on.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.